Hello, everybody. Uh, I've deliberately scrapped the title of my presentation, and I want to ask you to trust me for 15 minutes and come along with me on a random walk, because that's where I am. After more than 20 years in Wall Street and hedge fund industry, and the last 5 years being in Fintech, I'm finding myself in literally a random walk, exploring the space where Fintech and blockchain is sort of crossing roads. And I have this echo of Joe Lubin that I've heard at multiple conferences, either in person or virtually, speaking about the internet being broken. And while we're all immersed in the internet, and I'm sure a lot of you might disagree about this, but it is an echo in my ears, and I can't help but ask myself whether Fintech is broken. Being immersed in it, is it broken? I ask myself every single day as I follow all the innovations happening globally. I mean, the biggest thing that Fintech has brought to us, and I don't think there's any doubt, is that the customer, whether it's the end user at the retail level or the enterprise level customer, has become the king. Whatever Fintech transformation is out there is benefiting the end customer. The second thing that should be recognized is that this customer, in effect, has an army of, be it analysts, be it whatever tech guys, serving them through technology. The third thing is that this tool, APIs, this kind of glue, this kind of connector technology is empowering everybody that's in the marketplace, being financial institution, being tech companies, whatever it is. Add to that the cloud. Add to that the new business models that the Internet of Finance from the East has sort of showed us and is very dominant, and we in the West are watching and sort of feeling quite jealous about it. And finally, it's about empowering the customer, empowering the intermediaries, empowering all those that are involved. So what's wrong with Fintech? I mean, these, for me, are the 6 sort of dominant threads that Fintech, whether it comes from standalone startups or from within financial institutions, has actually accomplished. And here's what it is. If I look at the big successes, companies like Alipay, Alibaba, companies like Stripe, Revolut. I'm sure most of you have a Revolut card. What's wrong with them? They're another centralized entity. It's as if there's been a game, a relay from PayPal to these. When I look at the growth of assets and the dominance of Vanguard and BlackRock, these to me are the new too big to fail institutions. These to me are the new black swans. Regulation has managed whatever it managed through Dodd-Frank or other regulations to sort of disempower and reduce the risks in big financial institutions, and that has shifted from the sell side to the buy side. What's wrong with Goldman Sachs, Alibaba, or SoftBank? They run huge VC portfolios, and then they've invested in fintech. So what's wrong with that? Shouldn't we be rejoicing the fact that they've embraced transformation and they're investing in that? The problem with all this is it's just a change of hands. It's just a transformation of the existing. So it continues to be centralized. It continues to run the risk of socializing failures. If there is a failure, it's more strengthening monopolies. So let's really go back and think of where we are at and why the internet is broken. The internet, obviously, the TCP/IP protocol was the first open source protocol that we all understand that's behind the internet and has empowered whatever it has empowered. But the side effect is that it produced so much data that somebody needed to organize it. And that's where the GAFAs and the BATs of the world, the data monopolists, came about. They did serve a big need and a big purpose, a noble purpose in a way. However, in that process, they became extremely powerful. So all in all, what has happened from this first sort of open source protocol that is dominant and has gone mainstream, mass adoption, and so on, we definitely have increased connectivity, but what we don't have is we don't have a fair system. Whether we look at the way financial markets work, trade, e-commerce, whatever it is, education, this protocol, this open source protocol, did not do well in terms of fairness. It didn't have it built in. It did not help establish trust between those that are participating on this open source protocol. It did not have collaboration built in it. It was left to the stakeholders. So these are mainly the reasons that we are consciously or unconsciously looking for the next generation open source protocol. And this next generation open source protocol, whatever it's going to be, it has to feel more natural. Tapscott talks about, birds, flocks of birds flying without a leader naturally, and we've all watched at some sunset, some evening, these birds flying. And that's exactly what we need in terms of our markets. So what is this all about, and how would it look? It would be some form of capital markets that is much more natural than the way it is now. It would have, for example, sustainable finance built in, not as an add-on. We have built structures in capital markets, for example, you can understand that, where everything is an add-on. We force it. We put it on afterwards. And this you can see in many aspects. Even in SDGs, whether it's diversity, it's an add-on. But here you can see in capital markets that all the large-scale economic problems that we have, for example, problems with funding SMEs, or problems in trade, or problems and frictions between private and public markets and seamless crossing from one to another, or problems of financial inclusion and unbanked. It's all because capital markets were not set up in a way to address these problems. And it's not that we can't, but we can't arrive in a consensus to do this. So this is where the need for a next generation open source protocol comes, where all this is built in. So specifically in capital markets, and I think that's where we should start, because we understand them. We understand equity. We understand debt. We understand credit. So if we start from there and rebuild that open source protocol, then we can add more to that. Because obviously the idea is that there's going to be new value creation and new assets beyond equity and debt and loans. But if we start from scrapping out the power of all the intermediaries that you see there, the central banks, the registry, the central registries, the clearing and settlement institutions, the interbank facilitators, and instead have natural processes of registration, of transfer, and settlement, then what we will have accomplished is effectively the separation of money and financial instruments from the state, from central entities. That is what we need in capital markets to make them more secure and more liquid, but in a natural way. The way we are doing things now, we have really bad side effects. So what are the side effects that we want to get rid of? And I'm just going to give you some examples. Where we want to get to through this open source protocol is capital markets where we don't need antitrust laws. Why do we need antitrust laws right now, whether they're for tech companies or financial institutions or multinationals, for public entities? You all understand why we need them. We need to build a protocol in capital markets where we don't need antitrust laws. It's built in, the incentives are built in, and the agents are operating and trading between them in a way that we don't need antitrust laws. And these are the things that we are learning through Bitcoin blockchain, whether it's the 51% attack or avoiding that or whatever other issues we are facing and we are thinking about. That's what we want to look at as a guide to rethink how to structure capital markets. We want to empower regulators. We don't want to get rid of them, but we do want to give them the gift. This is a gift of not having to play this role of surveillance. There is no need. If we have a protocol in capital markets where there's real-time audit trail of all the transaction, there is no need for the surveillance role of regulators. And this can be on a global basis. We need to get to a point where trust is built in, and the way I think that this is going to be accomplished in capital markets and in other markets is by having monetary policies and think beyond classical money for payment. It can be in labor markets, it can be in other markets, where we have elastic monetary policies that are not centralized and they are different in different ecosystems. So what I'm looking for, what I'm dreaming, and there's already early evidence, early use cases, early elements of this, is markets where we have new assets and new values. And what's going on in these markets is you have personal data lockers. So there isn't the issue of having your data all around and you can share it selectively. This was discussed in detail by other speakers yesterday. You can have programmable liquidity, not centralized liquidity. You can have marketplaces for intangible assets. And most importantly, there's a blurring between private and public markets. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll go through my last slides faster. It's basically peer-to-peer trading in capital markets, real-time audit trails, low cost and fairness, financial inclusion built in. How are we going to accomplish this and why it is important is that essentially the big problems that we have, whether they're climate, whether they're poverty, it's not because we don't have resources to solve them. It's really because we can't sit at the table and arrive at a consensus to solve them. So what we are aspiring and what we are hoping is that some type of technology, whether it's a blockchain, whether it's a holochain, whether it's an acrylic graph, will solve and address these problems. And what I want to leave you with is that nothing will be solved, even with the most sophisticated technology, unless we have the intention to do that. So we need to always have an intention to do things in the right way. So looking to solve a human problem, to make it better for us, to make it more human, and use the technology to do that. I invite you to ask questions, and obviously join my social circle. I write a lot about these issues on Daily Fintech, on all the social media, and I welcome your questions.
One question.
Congratulations for the nice presentation. Very, very well. Everything structured very well. I have a question regarding the monetary policy that you mentioned. So you said, I would like to have from you an example of what you mean exactly of having a different monetary policy.
Yes. So I think a good way to look at this is you need one monetary policy, for example, for money markets or money, but I would structure another monetary policy for labor markets. So we have been used to thinking of goods and services and fiat money, but if you think as labor as another separate market, or you think of other intangible assets, for example, reputation, you could have another monetary policy for that. And it's clear that if you're in the money markets, you need a monetary policy that has to think a lot about how credit is distributed and produced and so on. But if you're in the labor markets, you need to think about other issues, or if you're in the reputation market. So we need these different models that build the right incentives for that specific market.
Right, Effie, thank you very much. Time is up.
Question?
The time is up. Effie will be available during the coffee break to answer further questions. Thank you very much, Effie.
Okay, thank you for that.